So week one, we start with Apex. We speak about Apex. Apex is basically the backend programming language. Okay, now you have to understand that when we are doing coding, we'll have to understand that there's a different programming which is used for backend logic control. Okay, so whatever happens in the backend automatically, or things which are related to the database and stuff like that. So all those logics need to be written using a particular programming language, and for us, Apex is the programming which will help you write logics. That if this happens, do this. If that happens, do that. Okay, these instructions will basically go through Apex. So Apex is the programming language, and this is the main, I would say, the main programming language which is used in Salesforce. Okay, so all that will happen with Apex. Now, next thing so we start with the basics of Apex. Next thing we talk about introduction to SOQL. SOQL is a query language. SOQL basically stands for Salesforce Object Query Language. Okay, and this is very similar to SQL. Okay, now the purpose of this SOQL is to write queries only to retrieve data from database. Okay, so when you're trying to execute these logics, when you're trying to write some logic to control some business processes, you will need to retrieve data time to time, right? Because logics need to be executed on the data only, right? So for example, if you have to write a logic that, okay, fine, fetch all the contacts where there is no email ID and delete all those contacts. Let's say that is what you want to do. So first thing what you have to do, you have to fetch all the contacts where there is no email ID. So that fetching the contacts is something that you will do using SOQL. Got that? So Apex can do other things, but retrieving data from the database is something that you'll have to do using SOQL, the query language. Then SOSL is primarily similar to SOQL, but it's a different query language. It is also a query language. SOSL stands for Salesforce Object Search Language. We are going to get into details of all these things, so don't worry, you don't have to remember all these names right now. But just I'm trying to set up the context here. SOSL is basically Salesforce Object Search Language. Instead of query, they call it a search language. So it is, I would say, another set of queries only, but which are more optimized to work on search. Okay, searching something from the database. Okay, so the SOSL queries are more designed when you have to search something in the database in multiple objects, in multiple fields and all. So those queries are designed like that. Yeah. So then we move into Apex triggers. Triggers basically refers to your logics that you want to execute with some data changes. So if there is a logic that you want to execute when a new record gets created, or when a record is updated, or a record is deleted, along with that, if you want to execute certain logics, that can be written using Apex triggers. So week one, this is the plan. Week two, we will start talking about asynchronous Apex. Asynchronous Apex is basically an Apex program that you want to run in the backend. Okay, asynchronously. Asynchronous means, see, there can be synchronous code. Again, there's something which I'll be discussing in details later on, but just to give you guys an idea, there can be synchronous code and there can be asynchronous code. Synchronous code is which needs to be initiated by someone, and then, or based on some event, it gets initiated and immediately the code gets executed. That is synchronous, in sync with something else. For example, someone clicks on a button and the code gets executed. Someone creates a record and the code gets executed. That is all synchronous. Asynchronous is something which will automatically get executed in the backend, maybe at a defined point of time, maybe a weekly sort of thing. Okay, so it is not completely associated with another event or something. Okay, so we'll talk about, so a lot of business logics may need to be asynchronous also. It's not that always you want some logic to be executed when someone clicks on a button. Sometimes it may happen that you want a code to run automatically every Friday to clean up your database, and no one initiates it. Got that? It should automatically go and run. So that's asynchronous Apex. So we'll talk about executing that sort of logics. Now there's more to asynchronous Apex which we'll discuss once we're talking about it. Next, we will talk in week two about Aura components. So now coming to the front end part of it. So Apex is all controlling logics, but what we need to do is we also need to sometimes design our front end. Okay, so we have seen some bit of UI customization in admin training, but now what if you want to build better user interfaces? Okay, you want to have more control on that. So that also you can do with the help of programming. So for UI development, there are different frameworks that we use. One is Aura framework, one is Visualforce, one is LWC. Okay, so Aura components and Visualforce, we'll have a look at these two in week two. Visualforce is more related to classic. Aura is lightning. So we will still quickly touch upon Visualforce. Will not get into details of it, but yes, I at least want you guys to have some idea on Visualforce also. Week three, we will start with the Lightning Web Component. So the new user interfaces which are being built for the Lightning experience, they are built using Aura framework and LWC. Okay, so this is basically about understanding how do we build those components using Aura and Lightning Web Components also. Now, the other thing that we are going to do in week 3 is, understand how do we combine Apex with Lightning Web Components and how do we combine Apex with Aura Components. So combine, when I say, I'm basically trying to say that, okay, fine, if you have to execute certain logics from the new component or the new user interface that you have built, how do you do that? Got it? So sometimes, they can be that, okay, fine, from my user interface, on click of a button, there is a logic which gets executed. So how do we call that? Okay. So that is something which we'll be discussing week 3. Week 4 is mostly, talking about some of the advanced concepts, exception handling, testing Apex. Okay. So week 4 is primarily focused on, how do we, uh, ensure the code is of good quality, how do we do testing and all that stuff. So, and, understand, how the code is getting executed and stuff like that a little more. Um, so that, we are able to write the right kind of code. Okay. So that is it. That's the simple roadmap for our developer training.